Hi.
Okay, so today's guest is welcome everyone to LA Jews for Peace Zoom. And today's guest is Josef Avesar, a friend and partner of LA Jews for Peace. He was previously a guest on our Zoom in April 2021. And if you go to the website, you can get a recording of that. Let me take this off now. Okay, so Josef Avesar is an Israeli with Iraqi immigrant parents. He is now an attorney or a retired attorney who resides in Southern California. Most important, he has devoted his life these past decades to studying and understanding the Israeli-Palestine situation. And he went beyond just study to propose well thought out solutions that would benefit all the people in the region, Jews and Arabs together. The way I see his development, it came in two phases. The first phase, he developed the concept of the Israeli-Palestine Confederation, of which he is president and founder. And this is a plan for a common government, a federal government as an umbrella over which the Israeli government and the Palestinian Authority and even Hamas would operate. The Israeli-Palestine Confederation is a government for all the people living between the river and the sea, Jews and Arabs. And I'm sure Joseph will expand on this during his presentation. The second phase, Joseph came to realize, at least in my understanding of his work, that the structure of the Israeli government as a Jewish state is at the root of much of the trouble between Israelis and Palestinians. And particularly, it has failed the core mission of all states, which is to protect its citizens. He argues that a Jewish state is bad for the Jews. He developed this concept with a series of 7 1 to 2 minute videos, each of which examines one aspect of the problem. And today, I believe he's going to put this all together. And that will be the thrust of this evening's conversation. Joseph will develop and expand the idea that a Jewish state cannot be a democracy and is bad for the Jews. Joseph has written numerous articles and commentary, many in the Israeli Times of Israel blog, and there's a link to that in the Zoom announcement. And he's an author of the book Peace, the Case for an Israeli-Palestinian Confederation. And in about 5 years ago, he joined, or 6 years ago, with Charles Fredericks to direct the film Surviving Peace, that explores why Israel-Palestine peace has stalled for 70 years. And a link to that is in the announcement. So Josef Avesar, please take the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jeff. Your description was very accurate, and I am very appreciative. And I'm very appreciative of the fact that you have invited me to come and speak to your great organization. I participated with you in many Zoom meetings, and I enjoyed them. And I particularly appreciate the fact, Jeff, that you supported and came to our simulations, and some of your members also came to our simulations, and I thank you so much.
Just a second. There's some noise on this. Does anyone know where that noise is coming from? Can people please mute you?
Is it you, Jeff?
Well, okay, I'm going to mute myself. And
it looked like it was coming from Sally's corner, whoever Sally is. I don't know her.
Okay, so I'll go on. We don't hear that sound anymore. As a background, and I was born in Israel. I lived in Israel for 21 years. I went through the Israeli educational system. My parents immigrated to Palestine in 1936 before the creation of the State of Israel. My father was a Zionist, my mother was not. And most Israelis, like me, become Zionists just by virtue of being born there. And the question never occurred to me, what does Zionism mean? I had some snippets of inquiries about it, about the right of the Jews and the Palestinians, and what happened in the Nakba. But pretty much I bought the whole Zionist idea totally. And later in my life, I started to question and started to observe Israel. I am a lawyer by profession. I think I studied political science, although I don't consider myself a political scientist. But I became very interested and very critical of Israel. And I think I was objective in my criticism of Israel, not out of hate for Israel, but out of really concern for Israel. I have many family members in Israel. My parents are buried in Israel. And I should say that many of my friends are very critical of what I am saying, and my family is also very critical. But that's not that important. But I noticed that the more I looked into Israel in what I considered to be an objective way, using tools that I am familiar with, such as democracy, fairness, equality, without stereotyping people based on their nationality, based on their religion, based on ethnicity, I started to realize that there is a lot of things that are wrong with how Israel conducts itself. And the more I dug into it, the more I realized that there are things that are wrong. But I couldn't really put the whole picture together. I wrote many articles criticizing Israel not being democracy, not having a constitution. I had a debate with Alan Dershowitz on that issue, but not until, so I had snippets of ideas about what's wrong with Israel, but not until recently when I heard a podcast about Bernie Madoff and about his Ponzi scheme. And I was fascinated by the podcast, but the more I heard the podcast and how he put it together for years and years and years, how he got investors to trust him. Many of them trusted him because he was Jewish, and they didn't think that a Jewish person would take it. It didn't even occur to them that they trusted him, that he had a system with lack of transparency, that basically was a fraudulent system from A to Z. And the more I read into it, the more I started to look into it, the more Israel made sense to me. I came to the conclusion that Israel is a Ponzi scheme. It's and a Ponzi scheme is defined in many ways, but it's basically a scheme based on fraud. It's a scam that promises high rate of return to the investors, And it relies on the most important thing about a Ponzi scheme or a pyramid scheme is that it needs constant investors, constant new people to participate, to be willing to invest their lives, invest their future, and believe that system. So in order to have a scheme like that, or you need to have investors, and you need the investors to trust the managers of that scheme and trust blindly, and you need lack of transparency. You need the investors to agree that that the managers, the government in this sense in Israel, is so pure and so has the right intention that you don't need to have a transparency. It doesn't have to stand up to real objective standards. And that's really what Bernie made of. That's how he had his Ponzi scheme. So if you look at Israel, what is the scam? What is the scam? The scam, the product. What is the product? The product is a Jewish democracy. That's the product that was sold and is being sold to us on a daily basis, or especially in Israel, Jewish democracy. The term Jewish democracy in Israel is synonymous with democracy. They don't really, they think, well, it's just. But if you look into it and you think, what does Jewish democracy means? It really means the opposite. A Jewish democracy is an oxymoron. Just like having, someone is selling you healthy cigarette, and they repeat that terminology, healthy cigarettes, and you start believing that cigarettes are healthy. But the selling of a Jewish democracy is a Ponzi scheme. And the investors in that scheme are all of us. From the day we were born, well, most of us, we have our young people in the military. Many of us are sacrificing their. No, I did not sacrifice my life, but many of them sacrificed their lives. Many of them sacrificed their health, and all of them, and many serve in the military, and it's a never-ending stream of investors. Israel has mandatory draft. It brings people into the military year after year after year for 75 years. And no one is questioning that. I saw these, there was a reunion of the Golani Brigade. And the father there, or the grandfather, in the reunion of the Golani Brigade said, my father was Golani, I was Golani, my son was Golani, and my grandson is Golani. In other words, he didn't even think that, why are you so, all these generations are Golanis? Why are you part of the Golani Brigade, the entire family? You're willing to become part of, you are really, your whole family are investors. Now, Israel expanded its ability to get what I call investors. It started to bring women into the military. They become what Israel called combatants, fighters. and it brings Jews from all over the world. The purpose of bringing Jews from all over the world is to have more investors in the idea of a Jewish democracy. And it convinces them that they are safer in the state of Israel, which is in wars upon wars upon wars for 75 years, and killing and dying of Jews. Somehow they were convinced, and we were convinced, or we believed that they're safer in a war zone. And Jews are flocking. I mean, if you have an anti-Semitism event in Los Angeles or in Paris, it's on the news in Israel as proof to them that Jews need to live in Israel, that they need to invest in the Israeli Zionist idea, which is against statistics of where's your, I see people on the news, Americans, South Africans, their children are being killed in the war, and they claim that Israel is the safest place to invest in. Now, investors, what I call investors, are the last people to believe that they are part of a Ponzi scheme. They don't want to believe that. They're the last people to believe it. Why? For two reasons. First of all, they don't want to believe that they were fooled. And second, they are concerned about their investment. They don't want to, it's pure investment. And I'm not talking about only investment in your personal existence. I'm also speaking about financial investment. So those investors that I call investors in the Jewish democracy, they were taught to trust the Israeli government, all of them, not only Netanyahu, from beginning to end, to trust them almost blindly. This is why Israel does not have transparency. The government of Israel is basically the same people that were elected to the Knesset. They're the same people. They cannot be transparent. They cannot overlook themselves. People in the Knesset are the same people that are in the government. Netanyahu is a member of the Knesset. He's the prime minister of Israel. Now, you see it very clearly now. There is a war. About 5, 6, 7 people headed by Netanyahu are deciding whether to go to war, whether it's wise to go to war, whether the war is going well or not, what is the goal of the war, not to mention the conflict of interest that Netanyahu has on a personal basis. But even if he did not have criminal charges and criminal trial, even if he was not involved in that, he would have had he has a personal conflict of interest as the prime minister and the Knesset member. The Knesset has not decided or has not debated whether it was a good idea to enter Gaza. Now, this is not the first time. It happened time and time again in Lebanon, in the occupation, etc. So how did they get to that stage of trust of the government and lack of transparency and having endless stream of investors and not really having a democracy and believing in things that are not objectively possible in deciding whether Israel is a democracy or not. For example, Israel expelled 750,000 Palestinian citizens of Israel. Now, you can't have a democracy when 3/4 of your population, or maybe 60% of your population, the people are not going to vote for the government, are expelled. That's in 1947, 1948, and we forget that. But the voters of the democracy that would vote against the government were expelled. On top of that, Israel created fear of Palestinians, fear of Muslims, fear of Arabs. And that's a mechanism to justify the blind trust, the bringing more investors into the Jewish democracy idea, because we, even though I am from Arab descent, I'm Iraqi Jew, we were all made to believe that Arabs are our enemy forever, and they are ruthless enemies. So we were taught to believe from the moment we were born that a Jewish state is the only way. It's the only possibility. And the idea of having a constitution is not for us. We are the Jewish people, we are Israeli. Gravity doesn't apply to us, and therefore we don't need a constitution. Ben-Gurion, in his declaration of the State of Israel on May 15, 1948, stated that by October 1st, 1948, within 4.5 months, Israel will have a constitution as a Jewish state. We are now more than 75 years later, and Israel does not have a constitution. They realized that a constitution would probably mean the end of Israel as a Jewish state, and so they gave up that idea, and the whole Israeli Jewish population, American Jews, the international community bought this concept that a Jewish state is a democracy without a constitution. It doesn't need a constitution. No one ever challenged it. Ben-Gurion knew, as part of the Ponzi scheme, he knew that when Israel started to go to wars with the Palestinians, on October 1st, when he realized there cannot be a constitution, he knew that he created a country in the same way that someone creates a high-rise building without having engineering, without having structural engineering, without having blueprints, just creating the country. That's what basically Israel is. And all its prime ministers since then knew and still know that Israel is a Ponzi scheme, that it cannot survive. It doesn't have the basic, necessary, fundamental infrastructure to hold the strength, to hold these tensions that are a country of that size which expelled 750,000 and now occupies 5 million Palestinians without giving them equality. They're not part of the Israeli, they're not part of the democracy. They're under occupation. They have to obey Israeli law. They have to obey Israeli Supreme Court decisions. They have to obey the occupation and the apartheid, but they are not allowed to decide their own government that would impose these laws, that would pass legislation against them. They are not allowed to do that. But Israel, as part of the Ponzi scheme, if you is ignoring, is oblivious to that idea that the Palestinians have been expelled, that they have to be part of the democracy in order for Israel to survive. So there are major structural defects in the state of Israel that are going to be exposed, in my opinion, soon. There is of course, no separation between government and religion. And there is no independent Supreme Court. And we've seen, before October 7th, we've seen those stresses coming into reality. Before the election, before the demonstrations, year-long demonstrations with hundreds of thousands of Israelis demonstrating against each other, hundreds of thousands. Before that, there were 5 governments that were elected within a short period, I think less than 2 years, because of that structural flaw of the Israeli system. So there are constitutional problems in Israel, even within the Jewish society itself. And if you add to it the 5 million Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, and the current war in Gaza and in northern Israel, I think that we are about to see the Ponzi scheme being exposed very quickly. And there are going to be some triggering events, in my opinion, that would expose the flaw of Israel as a democracy. First one is the taking over of Gaza, which is now happening. It's not been completed, but it will happen. If Israel takes over Gaza completely, that's going to create a huge structural pressure on the Israeli society that probably would expose Israel as a scam, basically. Once Netanyahu is removed, either quit or acquitted or convicted or by whatever means, we're going to see another. These are my predictions. We're going to see another way that Israel will be exposed as a Ponzi scheme. And the escalation of the war, meaning escalating it into northern Israel, Lebanon, possibly with Syria and possibly with Iran and the Houthis, that would create a structural pressure on Israel that would totally expose it as a Ponzi scheme. So, in my opinion, Israel has significant problems now that it is unable and will be unable to deal with constitutionally, intellectually, politically. And I made a list of those issues that the government of Israel will not be able to resolve because of its structure, because of its political nature and the nature of the people in the government itself, the people in the Knesset, the people, the leaders. And these are the issues. I think that rebuilding Gaza is going to be beyond the ability of the Israeli government to handle. Withdrawing troops from Gaza is going to be beyond the ability of the Israeli government to handle. Deciding the political future of Gaza is beyond their political, intellectual, whatever way you want to describe it, but it's beyond their ability to resolve. That's the future political structure of Gaza. Deciding what to do in the area between Israel and Gaza is going to be difficult. They may be able to resolve that, but that's difficult. What to do with the existing wall or fence or whatever you want to call it between Israel and Gaza. Eradicating Hamas, that they say that they want to do, is beyond the ability of the political or intellectual ability of the Israeli government to handle. Giving assurances to the Israeli and in northern Gaza and in in northern Israel and in southern Israel is going to be very difficult for the current government to handle. The question of the Israeli constitution, the judicial reform issue, the fracture between the Israeli society itself, which had started several years ago, in my opinion, is going to get a lot worse with this after or when this war is over, if it's over, but it's going to get a lot worse. In a way, I think that the war with Gaza gave Israel a little bit more time because it worked to unify the Israelis, mostly the Jewish people on the left, on the right, and the unification of them, the feeling of togetherness is based on fear. It's not based on common values, but it's based on fear. So, but this is going to dissolve very, very quickly. In fact, it already started. The friction between the so-called liberal Israelis and the so-called conservative Israelis or hardcore Israelis. By the way, I don't buy the idea of liberal Israelis. There is no such thing as liberal Israelis, in my opinion. I don't know if because in order to be liberal, in order to believe in democracy, you cannot believe in democracy for Jewish people only. The Israelis occupying the Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza. If you are truly a liberal person, if you truly are a person of democracy, you would insist on giving the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza equality. But the standards in Israel is so low that those who want to segregate from the Palestinians, knowing that segregation is not going to happen when you have the settlements and when you have the infrastructure that Israel created in the West Bank, when they believe in segregation, in an idea that is not likely to happen, and they don't believe in and they don't advocate for equality for the Palestinians, you can't call them liberals. In Israel, within the Israeli mentality, they are liberal because they are basically against Netanyahu. But based on objective standards, they're not liberal at all. They're not pro-democracy at all. Now, there is another issue that is going to be expose Israel, and that is the inquiry about the October 7th. Is there going to be an inquiry about October 7th? Seems like Netanyahu doesn't want that. But even if there is an inquiry, the only inquiry that is going to be is similar to the inquiry of the Yom Kippur War, after the Yom Kippur War, which is basically a technical inquiry. Who read the report? Who was watching the borders? Who told who? Did you send an email? Did you respond to my email, etc.? It's all going to be technical inquiry. It's not going to be on the substantive major issue of whether a Jewish state has proven itself after 75 years to be the right thing for the Jews. They're not going to inquire about that. That's an issue beyond the Israelis' willingness or ability to inquire about. You know, they say Israel has free press. Maybe it has free press, but it has to be within the limited boundaries of Zionism. You don't have free press in Israel to question the idea of Zionism. You don't have free press in Israel to question whether a Jewish state is good for the Jews. You don't have a free press in Israel to ask, why is it that we are 75 years of constant wars and bringing new soldiers and new investors to die and to occupy the Palestinians? We don't have those inquiries. It's beyond Israel's intellectual capability. If you bring those questions, they are going to be ignored. The media in Israel does not ask those questions, does not involve itself with those questions. You become the enemy of Israel if you ask those questions, as I do, So the other issue is, how does Israel prevent escalation of the war, escalation of the situation with Lebanon, with Syria, with the Palestinians in the West Bank? Don't forget about them. You know, basically the Palestinians in total have embarrassed the Israelis, have embarrassed them, have shown capabilities that the Israelis are not willing to, or were unwilling to see the Palestinians as capable of pulling off an operation of this nature. So what happened on October 7th changed the point of views of the Palestinians and the Israelis. And what I am saying, that the Israelis do not have the constitutional depth, they don't have the intellectual depth to deal with issues. The Israelis are used to dealing with issues based on military solution. All of these issues, most of these issues that I raised, are not part of the military. You can't shoot these issues with weapons. And Israel created an infrastructure of political system that respond to almost everything with weapons. And I just don't see Israel being able to deal with all these issues. And I think that as a Ponzi scheme, it's going to be exposed shortly, when I say shortly, within a year, definitely no more than 5 years. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Joseph. There's a lot to ask about and to respond to. And uh, let me, since nobody's put their hand up yet, I can ask the first question.
Go
And that
ahead.
is, what benefit does Israel see it gets by not giving Palestinians equal rights? Slavery in the United States, and slavery, as I understand it, excuse me, all over the world, is based on money, because the slaves were producers, and they were worth money. So what what benefit does Israel get by not giving these people equality? And then we'll go to Uri.
Well, the answer to that is no benefit whatsoever. But in their eyes, if you give the Palestinians equality, that's the end of a Jewish state. Then the Palestinians in Israel and in the West Bank and Gaza are not going to buy into that idea of a Jewish state. They're not going to they're going to vote. If they have equality, they're going to vote their own representatives. They're going to vote, which, by the way, will be the best thing for Israel. The best thing for Israel. They will end up with all these wars, but from their perspective, the worst thing that will happen to them is the end of a Jewish state. In my opinion, a Jewish state is, like I said, is bad for the Jews, but from their perspective, giving equality to the Palestinians, and that's really one of the major flaws that would expose the Ponzi scheme. You know, we are speaking about, when we are speaking about the Palestinians, the only solution that we are really talking about, when I say we, I mean the governments, or the government is Israel, is a two-state solution, which is a fraudulent solution. It's not realistic, and they know that. That's why it is a Ponzi scheme, because they are coming up with a response that they know is unrealistic. They know that. They've known that for many years, but they still, it's the exact same thing. You know, when I saw Bernie Madoff giving up all these statements to all his investors, these were fraudulent statements that he made up on his computer. That's the exact same response as the Israelis coming up with. If you ask them, well, what about the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza? They say, well, yeah, of course, I'm for a two-state solution. But you control them now. They are under your jurisdiction now. And they are completely oblivious to that. Oh, we are just about waiting for the two-state solution to happen any moment now. And the Israeli public in general, and the many American and Jews, and they buy this hook, line, and sinker.
Okay, I think I understand. The Jewish state is sort of like the golden cow, golden calf. Uri's got his hand up, and after him will be Yossi. So Uri, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Josef, thank you very much, first of all. I appreciate your positions, and I can support you on a lot of the things that you said. For one thing, I think Jewish and democratic is an oxymoron, doesn't exist. Obviously, anybody who understands the terms know that it's on the face of it. And the explanation I've heard when I raised that issue, they always told me Jews are over the whole thing. In other words, don't try to stick them to the normal definition. Jews transcend it. A couple of things, something that somebody once challenged the whole thing about Judaism and Zionism and Israel that says, who in the world gave David Ben-Gurion and the state of Israel the right or the audacity to say, we represent all the Jews and the state of Israel represent the Jews? And in order, so this is a question, why is the state of Israel pretending to be the representative of the Jews in the world? Now, it's not a question to you. This is a question that was addressed as a kind of like an open question that in 1948, or after the world bought the concept that the state of Israel represents the Jews. How come? Why? By whose declaration? By David Ben-Gurion saying that? So this is just supporting what you say. Now, supporting.
Uri, let me respond to
Sure.
you. I don't think Israel said they represent the Jews. I think Israel said we are a refuge for the Jews, which in my opinion is worse because they are basically saying Jews are under constant threat and they need to, if they want to live safely, they need to live in Israel. Otherwise, they are not safe. And we are always welcoming you, which in my mind, the way I see it now, it's like you're always welcome to be an investor in our project.
Okay, I got it. The law for the 2018, the nation law of Israel basically says Israel is not like all democracies, the state of its citizen. Israel is actually the state of the Jews of the world. And in that, by fell swoop, they actually 20% of the citizens of Israel disappeared. They don't count, they're not citizens. In other words, anybody, any Jew from the world, from Brooklyn or from Buenos Aires or from London, who comes to Israel, he says, my mother is Jewish, you become a citizen. So there's something crazy about the fact that Israel even pretends to be and represent all the Jews in the world because they are the state of the people. So in other words, I'm not arguing with you, I'm supporting you with your statement. Another thing I agree with you, Israel propagated the notion that Israel is the safest place in the world for Jews. Fallacy. 25,000 plus Jews died in Israel since 1948 as Jews protecting the Jewish state.
Yeah.
So this is a myth that everybody buys and nobody challenges. I have friends of mine, I got an acknowledgement for that after October 7, a personal acknowledgement. I have two friends of mine, 25 years ago, we had that conversation here in Los Angeles when they visited. They tried to convince me to come to Israel, to immigrate back, because Israel is the safest place. And I told them, you're wrong, look at the numbers. After October 7, when I called, and she says, Uri, I've been quoting you for the last month for all my Israeli friends. I remember that 25 years ago, you said to me, Israel is not the safest place for Jews. And on October 7, it was actually proven that you were right. Yeah. So this is in support of what you're saying. I want to support you with another point. You said Golani, Golani, Golanu. 40 years ago, I was involved with Foundation for Midas Communication. One of the people who joined us was Moshe Amirav. Moshe Amirav was a major player in the Likud in Jerusalem. And he was a right-winger, Betar, the whole 9 yards. And the reason he gave why he started in the 80s trying to join us to talk to the PLO, he says, I was in the Tzalchanim, I was a paratrooper. He says in 1967 or in 1973, he says, I was called for reserve duty and my son was serving in the same unit that I served 25 years earlier, the Tzalchanim and the paratroopers. That's when it hit me that we are perpetuating the war to be an intra-generational war, like the Golani, 4th generation of Golani, the same thing. This is a given thing that every 5 or 10 years, every generation in Israel is bound to get a war, to fight a war.
Yeah.
So this is just supporting what you're saying. I'm giving you all the points that actually I agree with you. Israel doesn't have a separation of church and state. It doesn't have separation between the three branches of the government.
Right.
The fact that you said that the Knesset, the parliament, and the government are one of the same.
Right.
So this is another thing when people tell you democracy, oh yeah, by what definition?
Right.
Another element, Israel refused to define its border from 1949. The first thing that the state does when they declare independence, they say, these are borders. By design, they refused to do that. And the explanation was very simple, because the 1949 armistice agreements with the 5 countries Israel signed the armistice agreement, Israel said, this is temporary, it's a hudna, we'll expand. And in order to prove it, we did it in 56, we did it in 67, we did it in 82. So in other words, the fact that Israel hasn't defined its border like any normal democratic state is a proof actually that the 48 borders are temporary borders in the eyes of the Israeli politicians. As far as constitution, you hit on a very good point. In 1949, I talked about it, Hillel Kook, who was a member of the parliament, who was a member of the Begin party, the second day that the Israeli Constitutional Assembly was elected in January 49 to write a constitution and declare an election based on that constitution. The second day that they convened, they changed their name from Constitutional Assembly, המועצה המכוננת, they became the first Knesset of Israel. And he stood up and he said, this is a putsch. What you're doing is actually throwing the democracy or the process. And he exiled himself to the United States for years and years. Because he says, what you're doing, you're actually abrogating your responsibility according to the 47 November partition agreement. You were supposed to establish a democracy and you're abrogating it. So in other words, all what I'm giving you is I'm supporting you in the whole thing. As far as like investigating committees.
Let me point out,
okay.
This is a 64th Zoom, and this is the first time that Uri has agreed with the speaker. Go on, Uri.
On all the points.
Good.
Okay, I'll continue later. I still have a lot of points to support you on what you said, because I see a lot. The Bernie Madoff is a far-fetched idea for me. I don't need that thing. I mean, the fact that you are the state of the Jews is enough to enlist the Jews in. So anyhow, thanks.
Okay. Yossi and then Samir.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Joseph, for your presentation. Although I'd like to make some accurate response to you. First, the idea of the Israeli government do not support 2 states. They support the occupation and settlements. This is a policy. Second, when it comes to the idea of 2 states, it's the international consensus. It's not a Ponzi scheme. 190 countries around the world, including the PLO, including most of the Arab states, including the Organization of Muslim States, African Unity, European Union, and officially the US government, they all support the idea of Palestinian states alongside Israel in West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. More or less, this is the formula. So to say that this is a Ponzi scheme, I think it's unfair statement, and it's completely removed from reality. And it's now coming back to the agenda of the world community again in very much force to talk about this. Now another point, and this is one thing that bothered me really very much. I got the impression is that if you get a state that majority of specific ethnics, like the Jews in Israel, it's by nature is anti-democratic. And I'm very much against this kind of philosophy. A regime, democratic regime, it's based on the political system, not on the ethnic groups. If you have, I remember the propaganda in Israel, they saying, oh, this Arab country is dictatorship, then this Arab country dictatorship. This is mean Arabs by nature are anti-democratic. This is why they have dictatorship. And this is a false racist statement. And I believe to say that Jews, if they have majorities, they will be anti-democratic, this is also unfair. There is a fight in Israeli history in 75 years of progressive Israelis, Jews and Arabs, fighting to make Israel more democratic, more human, and to have a peace policy. Yes, there's still a minority. Same thing in the United States. How many years there was a slavery in the United States? How many years were Jim Crow in the United States? Means that white people in the United States by nature are anti-democratic? Is the right thing to say? If now in Russia they have Putin, means that the Russian people by nature are anti-democratic because they are Russians? I think this is all nonsense with all the respect. In every country, there is a progressive and pro-democracy organization and grassroots, and they do their best to make their countries to be more democratic, more human, and more pluralistic. And the same thing happened in Israel itself. You have forces, grassroots, political parties, even in the Israeli parliament, and you know it, who are fighting for democracy, human rights, and peace and equality. And they do exist. And for some reason, you decided to ignore them. They do exist, and they exist in Arab countries. They exist in United States, in many countries. So a nature of a country, if it's a democratic or not, does not base on its ethnicity. Ethnicity does not.
Yossi, I never said any of that.
Well, you say that Jewish states cannot be democratic.
I said that a Jewish democracy. I said a Jewish democracy is an oxymoron.
This is what I heard. Yeah, this is true. I mean, a lot of criticism of Israeli society that you gave, it's all true, but it's not because it's Jewish. It's because you have reactionary in Israeli society and politics that are making Israel to look as today. But this is not, in historical perspective, it's not going to be forever. It might change. And the only one who can change it is the people in Israel itself will change it.
80% of Israeli society are reactionary.
Excuse me, Samir. You can say about also the Syrian society if they have Assad as a president. This is not right to say this because there are Israelis and there are Israelis. And you should know better about this because you have a progressive in Syria, pro-democracy, and you have reaction in Syria.
Yeah, well, I mean, the progressives,
so in
what
Israel,
they call them.
Wait, let me finish. You can speak after me.
I can speak later.
So in every country, the division, if you look at United States society, the division is not between white and black and Latinos and white. It's between the progressive white, blacks, Latino, Asian, who fighting together for more democratic United States. And it's the same thing in Israel. You know, there are grassroots organizations in Israel. Maybe you're not aware about them, Samir, but they do exist. They are human rights organizations.
I know they do. No,
Okay.
I'm aware of it.
So
but they are minority.
They're fighting to make
In America, the progressives and the leftists are minority.
Of
And-
course, also in Syria, they are minority.
And in Syria, they are minority, and Israel are minority.
Yeah, but in every
Samir,
country,
let
people
Yossi make a
are
statement.
fighting
You'll-
to make it more democratic, and I don't think it's funny, Samir.
No, I mean, Syria has a
Okay,
revolution in
so,
2011.
Yeah, right now they're minority, but it doesn't in history, in historical perspective, it doesn't mean they will be minority forever.
Not
Something
forever,
can be
no.
changed.
No,
Look at the
Samir.
history of the
Samir,
last
let's not-
100 years. Look at the history of 100 years, and you saw in different countries that used to be dictatorship, especially in Latin America, there are much more democratic countries now in Latin America than 50 years ago. You know, anyway, this is what I wanted to say.
All right. Now my turn. All right. Thank you. I agree with a lot of things Joseph said.
Oh, Samir, let Joseph respond to
He
Yossi.
finished. Huh?
But no, let us, our guest, respond
Okay.
to Yossi.
All right.
All right.
Go ahead.
What Yossi said was basically circumventing my statements and arguing against the statements that he or you, Yossi, believe I said. I never said any of it. I said that I'm not against Jews living in a democracy. It's not important their ethnicity. I am saying, strictly speaking, that a Jewish democracy is an oxymoron. And I am saying that the so-called Israeli left is hypocritical because they do not want to include the Palestinians under occupation, under Israeli occupation, as part of a democracy. They want to continue with the idea of a Jewish state. And I didn't touch anything about ethnicity. I am strictly speaking about a democracy where everyone is equal regardless of your religion, regarding your religion. So that's the essence of my argument. And I am saying that to believe that you can go on with the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza under the argument that a two-state, regardless of how many countries recognize two states, but those countries that recognize two states have failed to create two states. Israel failed to create two states. The United States failed to create two states. So I am standing by the idea that a two-state is a fraudulent idea. And
Yes.
even if I am wrong, if you truly believe in democracy, if you truly believe in equality, then equality should be today, now, 50 years ago. And any argument against that idea, to me, is hypocritical.
Ending the occupation, it's very democratic move. Ending the occupation of the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem, it's part of fighting for democracy and peace.
It's not.
Okay.
It's not. It's an excuse.
So you oppose democracy and you support the occupation.
No, ending the occupation is not a part of democracy. Okay? Especially when you are encroaching more on occupation. You can't say oh, I am against occupation. And while we are arguing about ending the occupation, let's keep the Palestinians as second-class citizens. You cannot say that at the same breath that you are that your idea of democracy is to have freedom, equality for the Palestinians at some point in the future. That doesn't work that way. If you're truly in favor of democracy, equality, don't come up with excuses. Equality means now, today. Anything else is, in my opinion, a fraudulent argument.
This is mean annexing the West Bank and Gaza to Israel. It's exactly what Netanyahu
No,
wants.
it means one state.
Yes, yes. This
It
is
means
what
one
Netanyahu
state.
wants.
It means
He wants
one
to annex
state,
the
and
West
that
Bank
would
and
be the
Gaza.
end of that. Look, what are we concerned about? We are concerned about equality. We are concerned about safety for the Jewish people and the Palestinian people. And the Israeli system, the Zionist Israeli government, have totally failed to give security and safety to the Jewish people. And they have lost any legitimacy to come up with more arguments to continue the occupation, to continue this two-tier system. And this is part of why I'm saying it's a Ponzi scheme. It's going to be exposed soon.
So you support the annexation of the West Bank and Gaza to Israel? Is this what you're saying?
I support one state.
So this is
Not
annex.
No, it doesn't mean that's you're
one state.
Look, I am saying one state. That's what I support. That's the ideal
I
solution.
understand. And what is the roadmap to this one state?
Election.
Who's going to
Election.
make it?
Election. That's
What
very
election?
simple. Election.
Election in Israel to say you want one state?
Election for the whole area of Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem. Stopping the domination
Yes.
of the Jewish state.
Yes,
Election for everyone.
that's right.
It's not
And how-
under the auspices of you keep
And how do you
thinking.
organize this election if the PLO and the Israeli government can oppose those elections?
You conduct an election,
Who's gonna
whether or
conduct
not that's a technical issue.
No, it's not. It's a political issue. Who is going to?
Do you support an election for everyone?
No, I support the end of the occupation.
Okay,
This
so
is
you do not. Yeah, you support the end. Look, I am also in favor of something really good happening to me in the future. We already know after 53 years, you lost credibility on that issue. Totally.
Me personally, I didn't lose any credibility.
If
Most
you
people in the world
if you say that
most people
that
in the
your
world
idea
do
of
support this
democracy,
state, so who's
if
losing
you-
the credibility?
if you say that your idea of democracy is that something will happen in the sense of removing the occupation after it hasn't happened now for 56 years, in my opinion, that's not credible argument.
Well, because the US government is the main obstacle to ending the occupations. They are the main obstacle.
Fine, whatever.
Well, it is.
Whatever the reason is,
reality. This
the
is
reason
why
is
they give completely support to the Israeli government. And anytime there was a motion in United Nations Security Council about Palestinian states ending the occupation, they veto it. And when they veto it, they are the major power in the world that led the occupation to continue. And you know it, and Samir know it, and anybody who proposed this idea of one state. Because even you say one state, how it's going to be implemented?
look,
Who's going to force it?
Israel, the United States support the occupation as well. But
Yeah.
Israel doesn't care about what the United States
Okay,
wants,
but there is
okay?
the public
Israel
opinion
doesn't,
Yeah,
the
but-
United
in the
States,
US.
But
Also,
Yossi, you forgot that during Obama administration in 2016, and that was the first time Obama did not veto two-state solution, and he pushed for it. And
no,
it was
this was
recorded.
nothing to do with the two-state. This was about the settlements.
No,
It was
no. The
Resolution
settlement that
Security
was
Council.
2015, 2014, he talked about it. 2012, no, I'm talking about exactly before the end of Obama, 2016. He tried in the last 6 months of his administration with John Kerry going back and forth, back and forth. He made maybe 10 trips in regard to two-state solution. And when they try to do something about it at the UN, the United States, for the first time, did not veto that UN resolution.
This
In
was
regard to
resolution
two-state
about
solution.
the
okay,
settlement.
I think,
Only.
No, no, not the settlement. No,
Yes,
two-state solution.
this
He
was not
tried.
about two states. No, it was about the settlements.
No, no, no. That settlement, that was before. That was years before. I'm talking the last 6 months of 2016. You
This
can
was
check it
about
out.
the settlements only.
No,
Check
no.
your facts.
I checked the fact. I already know the facts. I lived it. I wrote about it. I know about it.
Okay.
No, it was about two-state solution.
No,
Let's not,
All right.
I mean, that argument is.
Yeah. Now,
is not good.
my turn now. Right?
Yes.
Okay. I think I agree with a lot of things Joseph said. Definitely, I am for one secular democratic state. And why? For a very simple reason. Because in reality, today, it is one apartheid state. You just need to flip it and make it democratic. Number two, it does not require negotiations. No more negotiations. It does not require to transfer any population. Number three, it will accept all refugees, Jews, Palestinian, whatever. That's it. One democratic state, end of the story, end of conflict. It is very simple and it's easy to do. And to say that it is not possible, it's never been tried. How to be not possible? I mean, just allow the people in Israel and Palestine, in both the Palestinian population and the Israeli population, to vote. You just need it to vote for one-state solution. And it will be done. And also, I'm now coming back, back in history. In 1948, I think that the establishment of the state of Israel as a Jewish state, or the state for the Jews as a refuge, that was a big mistake. It was a big mistake done. It should have been right from the beginning. 1948, they should have declared one democratic state for the Israelis and Palestinians together. And that would have been fine. I mean, it will be accepted by all the Arabs, by all the Palestinians, and end of conflict from the beginning. It would not have been a conflict if they said, okay, we share the Palestinians' power. We are all together one democratic state. Kicked out the British in 1948. Okay, bye-bye, British. And we are an independent democratic state. And that would have been the end of the story, I mean, right from the beginning. And also, later, I mean, the years go by and they created what's called Israel, or Israel proper. And in 1967, they went and attacked 3 Arab countries, and they took over the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem and occupied it. Okay. If those Israeli at that time, I mean, Golda Meir or whoever, if they were smart enough, they should have just thought about what they're supposed to do with the occupied territories. And is it, you have, I mean, one or two solutions. Either you annex it and make it just like what you did before. Since 1948, you already created proper Israel, and supposedly Arab, I mean Palestinians and Israeli living together, and they have equal rights. Well, just repeat, just copy the same experiment in 1967. You annex it, you annex the West Bank, East Jerusalem and Gaza, and make it just like what you have, and one democratic state, and end of the story. They didn't do that. And also they had the other option, which keep the occupation. Keep the occupation for what? I mean, occupation to forever. I mean, they were damn stupid. I mean, not to think about the next day. And they kept the occupation now for 56 years. And they found out later, I mean, no, they cannot, I mean, continue that way. I mean, today, I mean, the Palestinians are still there. They could not, I mean, eliminate them. And they are not going to be able to eliminate 7 million Palestinians living in Palestine, in historic Palestine. That, I
Okay,
mean,
let Joseph, you said a whole bunch
and
of...
also, no, let me just, on the two-state solution. Two-state solution, that's, I mean, from my experience, whatever Joseph said is correct. It is fraudulent. Why? Because I experienced it myself. In 1986, I was the regional director of ADC, and I met with General Peled, who was an associate and a colleague of Ishaq Rabin, General Ishaq Rabin, and a good friend of him. And I met him here in Los Angeles in 1986. At the beginning, I mean, I hesitated to meet with him. But then I say, what the heck? Let me meet with him. Okay, let me hear what he wants to say. And I invited him to my home, and we had dinner. And after dinner, we talked. And he said, we like to have peace with the Palestinian. We want to make peace with the Palestinian. And I told him how. And he said, I support two-state solution. And I said, well, if you support two-state solution, I mean, before you support two-state solution, the two parties, they have to recognize each other. The state of Israel has to recognize the PLO as the only legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. And then the PLO will recognize Israel's right to exist. Then it will happen. And at that time, he told me, well, that is too difficult right now. Let me work on it. And he left. Then years passed, 1987. And at that time, I mean, Yossi and I, we formed the Coalition for Peace in the Middle East. We believed in two-state solution, and we had at the federal building a gathering of more than 5,000 people attended at that time. That was in 1987. And also in 1987, Dan Bustani was on the board of ADC, and he thought about creating the Cousins Club of Los Angeles. And I started with him, and I helped him, and I worked with him. And one of the speakers we invited was Stanley Scheinbaum. And he talked about what he thinks. He believes in two-state solution. And he said, I remember that if just Yasser Arafat agrees to recognize the state of Israel. And I said to him at that time, I mean, before you ask Arafat to recognize the state of Israel, Israel has to recognize the PLO And who's stronger? I mean, the stronger recognize the weaker, not the weaker to recognize the stronger. And he said, well, don't worry, I guarantee the Israeli side, the Labour Party, my people in Israel, they will recognize the PLO. But just let me find a way to get to Arafat. Well, then a year passed, and there was an opportunity. Yasser Arafat was speaking at the UN in Stockholm, Sweden. And Scheinbaum knew about it, and he said, well, I'm going to go and meet Arafat and convince him. And I said, all right, fine, go ahead. He went, and he met with Arafat, and he convinced him to declare, and he did. In 1988, Yasser Arafat, in the name of the PLO, he declared that Israel has the right to exist. And after that, nothing happened. Actually, in 1988, that year, the first intifada was already started in December 87, and it continued in 1988. And what did Rabin do at that time, General Rabin? He said, break the bones of the Palestinian children who were throwing stones. Break their hands, break their legs. That's what he did. And nothing mentioned about recognizing the PLO whatsoever. It was forgotten about it. And then in 1990, the Gulf War came. And then in 1991, sorry, because in 1990, the Iraq, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. And then in 1991, the first Gulf War. And then during that war, because of Saddam, Israel with a couple of Scud missiles, whatever, the United States protected Israel by sending the Patriot missiles and whatever. And because of that, after the war of 91, the United States government under Bush, George Bush, the father, he thought that now he can ask Israel to have two-state solution and sit with the Palestinians under the UN International Peace Conference. And he succeeded in that because, I mean, and also actually Israel refused that. At that time, they had elections, and Shamir was, the Likud won, and Ishaq Shamir was the prime minister. So he refused that. And then George Bush used the loan guarantees against Israel. He threatened to stop it. And that's what made Ishaq Shamir to agree for the Madrid International Conference. And finally, it happened. And at that time, also because of the Soviet Union collapse and the Gorbachev met with George Bush, the father. And anyway, they agreed for the International Peace Conference in Madrid. And it happened in 1992. And all the parties, all the Arab parties, I mean, not just the Palestinians, were represented not by the PLO. Actually, it was represented by the Palestinian leadership in the West Bank and Gaza. Dr. Haidar Abd al-Shafi, Dr. Hanan Ashrawi, Saib Uriqat, and they were part of the delegation, the Palestinian delegation, and the Ishaq Shamir representing Israel. And also they have Syria, Farouk al-Shari', the Minister of Foreign Affairs at that time. He attended the conference to speak on Syria, and Jordan, King Hussein, and Egypt, Hosni Mubarak, and even Saudi Arabia, Prince, attended. And it was Gorbachev with George Bush, the father. It was International Peace Conference under the UN to discuss the Palestinian issue and two-state solution. And it was going well until Rabin and Shimon Peres went behind the scenes to meet with Arafat and cook the Oslo agreement. And then later, when Rabin became the prime minister, then he announced the Oslo agreement. They cooked with Arafat secretly, and now it is in public, and that killed the Madrid peace conference. And that Oslo agreement was dead from the beginning. Why? That what I wanted to get that point, because Ishaq Shamir and Rabin did not intend to have a independent Palestinian state. They didn't believe in it. And they
Samir, I'm going to interrupt at this point. That history is
okay. I just wanna ended with one thing in regard to General Peled. General Peled, after when the Oslo agreement was signed in September 1993, he was very happy, and he thought, oh, now two-state solution is going to happen, and he was very happy. But he said, and that's according to his son Miko Peled later, he told me that in February 1995,
no.
one day his
No,
father,
this
the
history
general,
is
came home and he said, no, just let me finish that one. He said, Rabin doesn't want peace. I am very disappointed. And a month later, he died. General Peled died. And 8 months later, Rabin was assassinated, and that was the end of Oslo agreement.
okay.
That's what I wanted to say in
Joe,
regard to two-state solution. That was fraudulent right from the beginning, because Ishaq Rabin and Shimon Peres did not want for the Palestinian to have an independent Palestinian state.
okay.
Thank you.
So I think that you basically I think you agree with Joseph. But Joseph, do you have any response to Samir?
Well, no, I don't have any response to him. He basically agreed with me. So, but I would like to recapitulate before I leave about why the similarities, in my opinion, between a Ponzi scheme and Israel. A Ponzi scheme is a situation where the public see the facade. It does not see what's behind the facade. The facade is being concealed by various means from the public. And in
That's
general,
correct.
what? And what I see
It is correct.
in Israel, I see the exact same thing. There is a facade. Reality doesn't matter. In other words, whatever actually happens doesn't matter to the Israeli public, to its government. So if the occupation is being ignored, the Palestinians that are being expelled have been ignored. The idea that a Jewish state has been dangerous to the Jews has been ignored. The idea that it doesn't have separation of power is being ignored. The idea, I mean, the most important part in a democracy is transparency. Not that it's Jewish, it's transparency. That's what gives the public security. The fact that you elect people of your religion and trust them because of the fact that you have the same religion is the worst thing you can do, because you're basically telling them, we trust you blindly. because we are of the same religion. That's against the principle of democracy. In fact, the leaders should not be trusted. The leaders should provide full transparency to their people. When you give them carte blanche based on religion, you're harming yourself. That's why I'm against the idea of a Jewish democracy. It has been proven to be against the Jewish people and the Palestinian people. But all of that is being ignored because of certain techniques that is being used by the Israeli government, by the Israeli media, basically scaring the Jews that the Arabs and Palestinians and Muslims are inherently the enemies of the Jews, ignoring the fact that the Holocaust happened in Europe, ignoring the fact that Jews have lived with Muslims for years and years and years. In fact,
Centuries.
in fact, Jews have been much safer under Muslim governments than under Jewish governments.
Definitely.
But all of that is being ignored as if it didn't happen. So, I mean, to me, the similarities between Israel and a Ponzi scheme is striking.
I agree.
Can I try to, I see Ellie nodding.
No, it's correct. I mean, because
let me try to-
Rabin
let
and
me-
Shimon Peres, I mean,
Let
they
me
made
tr-
it sound. They made the Oslo agreement sound like a two-state solution, but inside themselves, I mean, they knew that they don't believe in independent state for the Palestinian. They thought the maximum they give them just autonomy, and that's it.
Let me try to
I have a question for Samir.
recount what I hear Joseph saying. What I hear you saying, Joseph, is that this idea of a Jewish state is being held up like a golden calf.
Right.
And that's why a recent poll of Israeli Jews say 97% across the whole spectrum believes or wants a Jewish state. And because they want a Jewish state so much, and they're given this Jewish state, the Israelis ignore the bad things that are happening because it is a Jewish state.
Exactly.
And I'm going to ask Yossi to respond to that comment.
Yossi or Joseph? Who?
You, Yossi.
I'm not sure exactly response to what.
The idea that the Israelis hold the concept of a Jewish state like a golden calf.
Okay, I don't know about this golden cow, but you mentioned something, or I want to remind people there are some principles exist in this world. It's called self-determination of nations. If you accept that the Palestinians are a nation, they deserve self-determinations, this is step number one. If you believe that the Israeli Jews in Israel is a nation, it's a step number two. And step number three is that each one of them have a right to self-determination. Currently, 98% or 97%, as Jeff said, of Israeli Jews, they want to live in their own separate Jewish state. I agree totally the fact that this Jewish state need to be progressive in order to stop being discriminatory and being stop racist. But this is only can happen from the people within the state. Nobody else can change it from outside. It only can be changed from the inside. And I do believe that people, countries do change. It's part of a historical process. I don't know how long it will take, but this will take. So the same thing with the Palestinians. In their self-determination, that, as I said, world community, progressive, right-wing government, left-wing, progressive, radical, they all accepted the concept that self-determination for the Palestinian people mean a state in West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem as a capital. This is what the international consensus exists. And I want to say, to tell that this is a pansy or fraudulent, this does not reflect the reality of so many countries accept this. And they're calling now again. And the main obstacle to implement this is the US government. And I repeat, is the US government, because they are the only one in this world that they can force Israel to end the occupations. It doesn't matter if it was Rabin in the past, Shamir in the past, and currently Netanyahu. It's the US government have the power to do it. And now I ask many times people who are speaking about one state, and I said, what is the roadmap? In order to get there, you need the negotiations between the Palestinians and Israeli government to form.
I can tell you the roadmap.
Wait, let me finish. To form one government. And you know what? I don't see realistically that Mahmoud Abbas and Netanyahu forming one government. This is
Both they have to go, I mean.
This is look like a joke. And not only, even if Gantz, Benjamin Gantz, and Yair Lapid will not form a government with Mahmoud Abbas or even with Barghouti that's sitting in jail or with Hania from Hamas. It's not going to happen. And you know it. This is a joke to say that they're going to form one government. It's not going to happen.
No.
So to push this, this is a deceiving, as far as I'm concerned, it's deceiving. Because if you want to propose to people, you have to show the roadmap. There is no roadmap to this, with all the respect. No roadmap.
Yossi, I happen to agree with you.
Election, who is going to organize this election? Netanyahu? Election?
Yossi, I happen to agree with you.
With Benny Gantz? He's going to organize the election?
Yossi, just a second.
This is, I'm sorry, this is a joke. It's really a joke. This is no more than a joke to say that they're going to organize the election. They are in power right now. Not you, Josef Avesar, and not you, Samir. They are in power. And you tell them, hey, go organize an election.
They have to
listen
Joseph agrees with you. Let him explain how he agrees.
Yossi, I happen to agree with you that there is no realistic roadmap for a one state, that there is no realistic possibility for the government of Israel to be dismantled or for the Palestinian governments to be dismantled. I agree with you. And that's why I am supporting a federal confederation government that will be created independently of the Israeli government or the Palestinian governments for the people of Israel and Palestine. And that is a realistic possibility, very, very realistic, and it can be created, and there is a roadmap for that.
You know, Joseph, I heard your proposal since 2010. We are in 14 years. Why this federation was not formed?
Well,
what happened?
Because there is a strong objection to it by the Israeli society and by the Palestinian society.
What about the Israeli government and the people?
There is a strong objection to it.
So how do you change
it? For you to say that I was not able to create it, I totally agree with you. Totally agree.
So what is
but the reason I was not able is because I am one person. pushing for that with
Okay.
few people. But that
No.
does not make the theory, the roadmap, realistic. I am basically claiming that the roadmap to create a federal government for the people of Israel and Palestine is $100 million away.
Okay.
Between now and creating that government, we are $100 million away. That's all.
I see. Okay, so it's only question of money.
Correct.
I
Yes.
see. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
that's-
Now, Mike, then I can tell you the roadmap. The roadmap South Africa had 30 years ago, it can happen in Israel. You just need a smart, brave Israeli leader, such as Miko Peled.
Miko Peled lives in
Azmi
San Diego.
Bishara.
He doesn't live in Israel.
Well, fine. He can go live in Israel and fight for it. Azmi Bishara, he can go back to Israel and fight for it.
He will never
It
go
just
back to
needs
Israel. He
one.
ran
No,
away
no,
from
let
Israel.
me answer that.
Okay.
In South Africa 30 years ago, what did it require? The roadmap.
It's Samir.
It
No,
just
no, no,
required.
Samir, this is
no,
where I
Samir,
disagree
Samir,
with you.
South Africa is not a very good analogy because the South
No,
African
no,
elite. No, just a second, Samir. The South African
no,
elite.
no,
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 slow down.
no, no.
No. You got to understand South Africa.
No. We
You're
have to have South
completely
Africa.
misconstruing South Africa.
No,
South
It
Africa-
is not.
The South African white Afrikaans elite by the mid
It's
70s.
an apartheid system. Apartheid system.
No, the elite.
Well,
South
Israel is
Africa-
worse than
I'm not going to
worse
argue with
than
you,
the
Samir.
apartheid.
I'm going to cut you off.
What? No. Why would you mean cut me off? I'm saying that the apartheid system in South Africa, it is similar to the apartheid in Israel. And actually, that's what it requires. If you want to get rid of the apartheid system,
Samir,
you just
I
need.
disagree with you, and I'll tell you why. I disagree with you. I don't think it's
Why you disagree with me?
I'll tell you why. Because the world has accepted the idea of a Jewish state. Rightly or wrongly, they have accepted the idea of a Jewish state. And because it has accepted that idea, and because of the religious implication of that idea, the Jews have a lot stronger argument to demand a Jewish state. Now, I do not support that argument, but from a realistic point of view, in my opinion, the Jews in Israel will have a lot more support for the idea of a Jewish state, where in South Africa there was no support for an apartheid system. The Israeli Jews were able to create a narrative that removed the racism and created a completely different narrative based on religion, based on the Holocaust, which I personally do not approve of. But they were successful in doing so. And therefore, to dismantle the Jewish state of Israel is going to be unrealistic, in my opinion. But I think that it is realistic to create a federal government, confederation government, because many Israelis, many Jews, many Palestinians will support. And the only difference is, like I said, is to create an election to have the common government that would be acceptable to both sides. And the Israelis will not be able to refute or oppose that idea, because that idea does not contradict their core issues, which is a Jewish state and what Yossi just said, that the Jews are entitled to have self-determination. It does not contradict that, and it does not contradict self-determination for the Palestinians. In fact, it does not contradict the two-state. It does not contradict the one state. It's a mechanism for peace.
Okay,
Okay,
Judy just
but
put up her
according to
hand.
you, let
No,
me
no,
let me just make the
Samir,
comment.
let Judy.
Let me
ask
make the
her-
comment or what Joseph said. Joseph said the Jewish state is bad for the Jews, and it is bad from inception until now, and it's gonna be bad from now and forever. It is bad, and it would never happen. And that means if that's what the Israelis want, that means they want war forever, and they will destroy
and
themselves.
that's exactly what Joseph said. Let Judy make her comment. She's got her hand up. Let Judy.
Okay, this is a question. My problem with everything a lot of it's been said tonight is that Joseph's, I mean, just the premise that what everybody buys about Israel is that's a democracy. I don't think people really care about democracy so much, but the big lie, and he's kind of using the Ponzi scheme as a big lie, but the big lie is that they're surrounded by all these Arabs that hate them, and so they need to have constant self-defense. If I think about the Jews that I know, both the ones that October 7th changed everything and the ones that don't, that already supported, it's all because they're surrounded by these evil Arabs and they're everywhere and they have to have constant defense. And that's not going to, I don't see why that, Joseph, I don't see why that's going to give them their comeuppance. I think, the Hamas thing just supports that, and nothing's going to, I don't see anything changing. I mean, yet Netanyahu's in power and they're threatened by the, Iraq and all, and not that Iraq are Arabs, I guess they're not, but anyway, they're threatened and everyone's still going to buy that and nothing's going to happen. So it's sort of a question and a statement.
What's the question?
The belief in democracy, I mean, everyone thinks they are a democracy, but then but they don't count the Palestinians. I mean, the Arabs and the Palestinians, nobody even thinks about it. They don't care. They think I don't think the fact that they're a democracy or not a democracy is what's changing anybody's mind about Israel. I think it's that they think that they're threatened, and
No,
nobody
I tend to agree with you. I don't think that the public will be shocked to see that Israel is not a democracy and therefore change its views regarding Israel. I am saying that because Israel is not a democracy, it will structurally be exposed to itself. In other words, it will have structural issues within its society because it's a democracy. It's not a democracy. Not because
I hear what you're saying, but that I don't see that. I just see Hamas and the Arabs being a constant threat for like 20, 30, 40, forever.
Well, it doesn't matter if you see or not. I mean, look at the last 5 years, Israel was going through government upon government upon government. That means that there is a structural problem in the Israeli system. When you saw these demonstrations day after day for a whole year,
and nobody cared, and it didn't do anything.
No, the people did care, especially in Israel. They did care. They cared very much. They realized that the problem is that Israel is not a democracy. They do care because they do not want to have a government that is
Theocracy. They don't want a theocracy.
yeah, they did care. They were
Of course
facing those issues.
They demonstrated for 8 months before October 7th.
Yeah.
But when you see all the billionaires, and I read I couldn't believe the number of billionaires that were giving approximately like almost $1 billion. I mean, 990 something. There's like 5 or 6, and then there's tons of rich. All these people are going to keep contributing, and I just think the money and the Jews and Oh, I would love what you say is gonna happen to happen.
Yeah,
I
but
can imagine everything's gonna happen. I mean,
that's
look at
exactly
Biden.
what I said.
He's giving away the presidency. He's giving it to Trump because of all the money he's getting, and nothing ever changes. I mean, I'm just so pessimistic.
Well,
Look,
in a Ponzi scheme, the people who refuse to believe that it is a Ponzi scheme are the investors, and they keep on giving because they do not want to believe that it is a Ponzi scheme. That's what
When is Schumer ever gonna not support? What's gonna make him change his mind about giving his money and his support to Israel?
Schumer is not giving his money. Schumer
Well,
is
well, okay, but I don't know the names of
Schumer
the
is
billionaires that
giving
are, but they're all,
Schumer is giving weapons to
yeah,
Israel.
okay, same thing.
No, it's not the same thing.
No, it's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing. It's giving weapons to Israel for its own internal U.S. Reasons. It's not giving money, and it is and for his own internal political reasons. But he's not giving them $14 billion check. Go and spend it wherever you want. He's giving them $14 billion of
Well, all the worse. I mean, nothing, what's
of military weapons.
okay.
okay, Yossi, you've got your hand up. I'm gonna have you ask the last question and hope it's short.
Oh, I just
Let Joseph give an answer, and then we're gonna call this quits.
okay. I just want to say again something. You know, everything in the world history, it's a process of change. The world is not status. The same thing could happen inside the Israeli society, inside the US society. I want to say again, the reason that we do not see peace between Israel and the Palestinians is the major reason is the US government. However, something is changing in the US society. The criticism within the Democratic Party about the policy of Biden toward this last war, it was unprecedented. And you can see it in a different poll. Many young people, Arab American, Muslim American, are very angry with the way Biden conduct the war and give a blank check to the Israeli government, to Netanyahu. And Biden administration and Democratic Party is very much aware about this. This is what's changing now in the US society. And to me personally, it's give me a hope that will force the US government to take a different direction. Because without them taking a different directions, Judy, you're right, nothing will be changed without them changing the directions. Because between a peace between Israel and the Palestinians is not the $100 million, it's the US government policy. This is what's standing in between. Somebody in the world community have to impose it or force the Israeli government like Jimmy Carter did on Menachem Begin in 1979, that force him to accept return to 67 border and make peace with Egypt. This is what Jimmy Carter did. And you know it, that this is what he did. And this was missing today in the US government, but there is a process that I see in the US society of being much more critical of the Israeli policy, of the US policy, and this would give me a hope. Without this hope and just saying nothing will change, it doesn't give no hope, you know.
But whether Biden or Trump wins, but whether Biden wins or Trump wins, we're still going to support Israel completely. Biden does not care. He's getting too much money and he doesn't care. I mean,
I don't agree that Biden doesn't care, doesn't feel the pressure, Biden. He does feel the pressure and it's real. And different articles from different major newspapers.
It's been going on for months and he hasn't changed.
Different articles of different major newspaper and the electronic media shows that Biden under enormous pressure to do something about the Israeli Palestinians. This is why he mentioned at least once a week 2 states. And then I read in Israeli paper and Washington Post that he's preparing, I don't know if this is true or not, but there is enormous pressure and he have to respond to it. If we do not believe in process of changing, then what's the point? I do believe, I don't know if it's gonna happen in my lifetime, but I do believe that this process of progressive change will happen because so many people see that what's happening now, especially the Israeli government war on Gaza, they see it like half of Democratic voters for Biden believes that what's happening in Gaza is a genocide.
Yeah,
This
and
was a
Biden's he's already going to veto the UN resolution.
Okay, but this is just one resolution. Now you don't know what's going to happen next resolution. We don't know, but it's not going to be status quo forever, you know?
Well, my prediction is Biden keeps doing what he's doing. Trump gets elected, and there's another 4 years of supporting Israel at least. And so it's just, I mean.
But Judy, let me ask you: do you see a change in a Democratic Party or Democratic voters? Do you see the change?
Yossi, we all see. Yossi, we all see the.
I should hope so with what's going on in Gaza and what we see on our TVs. But I mean, so we've been protesting now. I mean, not me, but I mean, the protests have been going on for months, and he doesn't do anything. I mean, it's just slaughter. I mean, it's the most amazing thing that's ever happened, and the fact that nothing has been done, that we're still sending arms, that makes me think it's going to go on forever. I'm sorry, it's so horrible, and I so have no hope, and I wish I did. I'm sorry. It's just the slaughter is just
Okay,
slaughter.
I'm gonna ask Joseph to have the last word, and then I'm gonna say goodbye.
Thank you. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been going on for almost 150 years. It was before all of these presidents were born. The United States government is really not the solution. It is hypocritical when it comes to Israel-Palestine. The United States believes in a constitution. It believes in separation between church and state. It believes in equality. It believes in the people are right to exist and have self-determination regardless of their ethnicity or their religion. But when it comes to Israel-Palestine, they support a Jewish state, which is opposite their core belief for themselves. The United States believe in a federal government, but they don't believe in a federal government for Israel-Palestine. The United States opposes segregation, but actually supports segregation between Israelis and Palestinians. The solution is peace. That's the only solution. And the only people who can create peace are the people of Israel and Palestine. Not the United States, not Europe, not anybody else. It's the people of Israel and Palestine based on democracy, based on equality, based on fairness and recognition of what was done to the Palestinians, especially to the Palestinians, and the end of this superior rights to the Jews over the Palestinians. That all has to end. Equality is the only way.
That's correct.
Okay. I thank you, Joseph.
All right, thank you so much.
I wish we had another half hour so that I could explain why everybody explain the truth to everyone. Anyway,
Jeff, explain it. Jeff, explain the truth. We give 2 minutes. Explain the truth.
Well, you know, Joseph, I don't want to do this because it's after 9. Let me just say one sentence. Joseph says the peace has to be made within Israel-Palestine based on democracy. the trouble is half the people there, the Jews, don't believe in democracy. They believe in a Jewish state. And how do you get past that is the real big issue. Anyway, I thank you all for coming this
All right,
morning.
thank you.
Thank you,
We'll have
Jeff.
this on the web I will have the recording published in a couple of hours.
Thank you, Ellie.
And I
Thank you.
thank you, Joseph. Your work is exceedingly interesting and clearly thought-provoking and raises a lot of emotions.
All right, thank you so much.
And I think that you've got a lot of truth in what you say. And I think that the difference between you and Yossi and Samir can really be melded together if we step back a little bit. Anyway, thank you all.
All right,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.